Imagine this. From the moment you were born, every word spoken around you was programming your mind, teaching you what to believe, what to fear, even what to think about yourself. What if I told you that most of those truths aren't yours at all? That you've been living under invisible agreements, silently signed long before you even knew how to say yes or no?
Now here's the real shock. These agreements determine whether you live free or trapped. And unless you break them, you'll never truly be yourself.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain. Are you ready to discover which of your beliefs might actually be your prison? Hello, everyone. Hi, all, and welcome to Book Podcast Zone. I'm Emma.
And I'm John.
And I'm joined by my partner in discovery, John.
It's really great to be here.
Today, we are undertaking, well, a really extensive deep dive. We've got a whole stack of sources centered on this ancient Toltec wisdom, the stuff distilled by Don Miguel Ruiz. We're specifically focusing on the journey he lays out in the Four Agreements. Our mission, really, is to unpack these powerful pacts, these agreements, and examine in quite a bit of detail how they shape or sometimes, honestly, cage our lives.
Yeah, absolutely cage them.
And hopefully we can provide you with a clearer roadmap, towards psychological, maybe even spiritual freedom. We want to go way beyond just the surface summaries here.
Definitely. We're aiming to get into the real transformative mechanics at work in these ideas.
Okay, so let's start where Ruiz starts, right? By stepping through what he calls the Toltec doorway.
Mm-hmm.
This wisdom he shares, it's not something he just made up. It comes from a really ancient lineage of knowledge keepers. The Toltec, they flourished way back in Mesoamerica.
Exactly. And it's important to understand, this wasn't just like a philosophy class or some kind of social theory. It was a complete way of life for them.
Really practical.
Very practical, yeah.
Yep.
All centered on pursuing personal freedom, inner knowledge, and finding harmony with the universe.
And Ruiz himself, he doesn't just present this as dry philosophy, does he? The sources suggest he's acting more like a nagual.
That's the term, yeah. A kind of shamanic guide. He's taking these complex, sometimes pretty esoteric practices of the Toltec. He calls them the artists of the spirit. And he's simplifying them, making them accessible for, the modern mind.
Artists of the spirit. I like that.
It captures their focus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They were all about mastery. Mastering your own intent, mastering personal transformation, and ultimately mastering love. They truly believed that this inner knowledge was the only real path.
And the book itself, The Four Agreements, apparently it didn't just come out of academic study. The sources say it was sparked by something really personal for Ruiz, like a profound vision.
That's right, a deeply personal, almost mystical experience. And framing it that way right at the start, it does something important. It signals that this isn't just another self-help book off the shelf.
No, it feels more like an invitation to a genuine adventure, maybe a transformative one.
Exactly. It suggests that if you really engage with these ideas, you're tapping into something ancient, something potentially very powerful.
Okay, so if we're starting this journey, where's the first step? It seems to be about confronting how we see things right now. This smoky mirror idea.
Yes, the smoky mirror. This is fundamental. The core concept here is that we aren't actually seeing objective reality as it is. We're looking at life through a lens that's, it's fogged up.
Fogged up with what?
With fear, with judgment, with all the deep conditioning we've soaked up since the moment we were born. It's smoky because our attention is constantly fractured, pulled in different directions by self-criticism, by external noise, by what everyone else thinks.
So we're not seeing clearly at all.
Not really. We're seeing a distorted reflection.
Yeah.
And the critical emotional turning point, the first big aha moment, is when you start to actually realize the truth of that illusion.
When the fog starts to lift a bit.
Precisely. When that fog begins to clear, even just slightly, you get this dawning realization that a huge amount of your suffering isn't caused by external events. It's largely self-inflicted.
How so?
It's driven by that relentless voice inside, the internal judge, which operates based on a whole set of laws and rules that, crucially, you never consciously agreed to write.
The rules we just absorbed from culture, from our parents.
Exactly. These hidden truths about human existence, like you're not good enough or you need to achieve X to be worthy, they obscure the actual reality. We get convinced that the world we perceive, often filled with fear and scarcity and judgment, is the only possible reality.
But the Toltec perspective is that it's just the smoke in the mirror.
That's the core insight. The initial realization that the mirror is smoky is probably the most critical step in this whole process. Because if you look into that mirror and you see someone flawed, someone suffering, someone inadequate.
Which, let's be honest, many of us do.
Right. The Toltec wisdom says, That's not actually you. That's the smoke. You're viewing yourself through the distorted lens of all those agreements you've made, the collective dream, not through the fundamental truth of who you really are underneath it all.
And recognizing that distinction, that shifts everything, doesn't it?
Completely. Because think about it.
Hmm.
If you believe your suffering is caused by external things, bad luck, other people, the economy, you naturally look for external solutions. You try to change the world outside.
Which is often frustratingly difficult.
Right. But if you realize the suffering is largely self-inflicted,
Yeah.
stemming from these internalized agreements, then you start looking for internal freedom. You realize the power to change lies within you.
So you absolutely have to recognize the illusion first. You have to see the smoky mirror for what it is before you can even begin to think about breaking the agreements that create the smoke.
Couldn't have put it better. It sets the baseline. It's step one. We have to admit, at least to ourselves, that we might be living in a kind of consensual, often fear-based dream before we can genuinely start the work of waking ourselves up from it.
Okay, that's a powerful starting point. Like subscribe and share for more update and continue to next.
Okay, so building directly on that smoky mirror idea, Ruiz then takes us deeper into the problem. He describes our kind of default state, the way most of society operates, as an everyday trance.
An everyday trance, like we're sleepwalking.
In a way, yes. It's not just that individuals are asleep, but that society as a whole is operating within this deeply entrenched, shared state of consciousness. He calls it the dream of the planet.
The dream of the planet, what does that entail?
Well, think of it as the collective script. This dream provides all the rules, the ethical frameworks, the laws of what's considered acceptable behavior, what success looks like, what failure means, all of it.
And because basically everyone around us seems to agree on this script.
It feels completely undeniably real. It feels like objective reality, not just a shared agreement.
And this leads into one of his most, maybe, startling metaphors, doesn't it? The idea that humans are domesticated like wild animals.
It is startling, but it's incredibly insightful when you unpack it.
Yeah.
This is where the childhood programming phase really comes into focus. We're born, essentially, wild and free, full of potential. But almost immediately, the domestication process starts.
By who? Our parents.
Teachers, primarily, yes. Our parents, our teachers, religious leaders, society at large, and, importantly, they're not usually doing this maliciously. They themselves are acting out their roles within the dream of the planet. They're just passing on the script they learned.
How does this domestication work, then?
Through a pretty straightforward system of reward and punishment. It's operant conditioning, basically, applied to the human spirit. We get rewarded with attention, approval, praise, maybe even treats when we follow the rules of the dream, when we conform to the agreements.
And punished when we don't.
Exactly. Punished with disapproval, criticism, withdrawal of affection, sometimes even physical punishment. When we rebel against the established norms, when we express our authentic selves in ways that don't fit the script, we learn very quickly that it leads to pain or rejection.
And this happens when we're really young, right? Before we can even think critically about it.
That's the crucial part. This deep conditioning process happens before we develop critical thought. As children, we're like sponges, just absorbing everything around us. We internalize this massive book of law, as Ruiz calls it, all the rules, beliefs, judgments, and fears of our specific culture and family.
And it's not just the external rules we learn.
No, and this is maybe even more damaging. We internalize the system itself. We create the judge and the victim inside our own minds.
The judge and the victim.
Yeah. The judge is that inner voice that constantly monitors our behavior, comparing it against the book of law, issuing judgments, finding fault. And the victim is the part of us that feels the shame, the guilt, the fear when the judge finds us lacking. The part that believes the judge's pronouncements.
Wow, so we basically install our own prison guards.
That's a great way to put it. And we sign these invisible contracts, these agreements. I agree I'm not good enough unless I achieve X. I agree I must please others to be safe. I agree this emotion is bad. Often just to feel worthy of love, to avoid the pain of punishment, both external and, crucially, internal from our own judge.
So all this individual domestication happening across millions of people, that creates the shared dream.
Precisely. The collective result of this massive multi-generational domestication project is the dream of the planet, this huge collective illusion that's just saturated with judgments, limiting beliefs, fears, and rules about how things should be.
And again, the problem isn't that the dream exists necessarily.
No, shared agreements are needed for society to function. The problem is that we mistake the dream for objective reality. We forget it's just one possible script if you feel inherently unworthy, for instance, or if you live in constant fear of social rejection.
Which so many people do.
Exactly. That feeling is usually a direct reflection of the specific shared dream you were born into and signed up for, not some fundamental truth about your actual being.
And these agreements become like invisible chains.
Absolutely. This collective dream severely limits our personal power and our authentic expression. Think about how much energy we exhaust just trying to conform, trying to meet external standards, trying to appease the judge, trying to avoid punishment. Energy that can be used for creativity, joy, love. It gets diverted into maintaining the illusion.
And Ruiz points out this isn't unique to our time or place, right?
Not at all. He emphasizes that every culture throughout history and across the globe has its own version of the dream, its own domestication system. But perhaps for us, in the modern West, the system is amplified by the speed of information, the scale of media, the constant comparison.
Okay, let's try to make this really concrete. You mentioned grounding it in a U.S. context.
Yeah.
How does this domestication play out here and now? Think about social media, for example.
Oh, social media is a perfect example. Consider the relentless pressure, not just to be present, but to project a very specific image: success, happiness, productivity, perfect relationships, perfect bodies. That carefully curated feed becomes a collective agreement, doesn't it?
Yeah, the unspoken rule seems to be your visibility, your ability to perform happiness and success online, that's directly tied to your worth as a person.
Exactly. Your consumer capacity, your engagement metrics, your follower count, these become the agreed upon measures of value within that particular dream space. And the fear of not measuring up, of being invisible or judged as inadequate online is immense.
And what about the more traditional American dream? That idea of, the house, the car, the high-paying job.
That's another powerful form of societal domestication. The traditional model, which often involves accumulating specific levels of wealth, achieving certain job titles, owning particular assets by a certain age, acts as a very strong set of agreements.
It defines success very narrowly.
Incredibly narrowly. And it imposes harsh judgments for perceived failure. If you haven't hit metrics A, B, and C by age 30 or 40 or whatever the current benchmark is, you're judged, not just potentially by others, but definitely by your own internal judge who has absorbed that societal script.
So the collective fear isn't just feeling inadequate.
No, it can feel almost existential. It's the terror of being labeled unsuccessful, lazy, or a failure according to the rules of the shared dream. And the psychological cost is enormous: chronic anxiety, comparison, never feeling like enough, because you're constantly chasing these external metrics that were manufactured and agreed upon by the collective.
Metrics that might have nothing to do with your own authentic desires or values.
Precisely. Breaking free starts with recognizing that those specific goalposts, those definitions of success and failure, were largely arbitrary. They were set by the dream, not by some inherent natural law of the universe.
And it's that fear, isn't it? The fear of the judge's sentence: you failed, you're not worthy. That's the real prison.
That's the lock on the cage. The whole domestication process forces us to constantly seek external validation, external approval, moving us further and further away from trusting our own inner guidance, our authentic core.
So the first step towards liberation is recognizing that the rulebook wasn't written by some ultimate authority.
Right. It was written by other people, other prisoners, really, operating under the same shared fear, just passing down the agreements. Seeing that clearly is the absolute starting point for taking back your power.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Okay, so we've identified the problem. This state of domestication, living inside the fear-based dream of the planet, policed by our own inner judge. Now Ruiz starts giving us the tools to break free. The first one is the first agreement.
Yes. Be impeccable with your word. And this agreement tackles the single most potent creative force we possess as humans: our word. Language.
He doesn't just mean speaking politely, does he? He frames it as something much bigger, much, much bigger. He calls words a literal force, pure magic, actually. He argues they have the power to either create beauty and heal, or to completely destroy.
Wow, magic. That sounds intense.
It is, but think about it. Our word, our language, is the primary tool we use to create our reality, both internally and externally. When you speak, when you think in words, you are essentially casting a spell, defining what is real for you, manifesting your world.
So if you believe your words don't really matter,
then you've already signed an agreement that limits your own creative power. You've cast a spell of powerlessness on yourself with your own belief. The word becomes either the hero or the villain of our personal story, depending entirely on how we choose to wield it.
Okay, if the word is that powerful, it suddenly makes a lot more sense why Ruiz emphasizes this first, and it probably explains why maybe most of us inadvertently use it to keep ourselves small or unhappy.
That leads right into what he calls the poison of careless speech. When we aren't impeccable, when we're careless with our words, the consequences are immediate and often devastating.
Like what kind of consequences?
Well, think about how careless speech poisons relationships. Gossip, for example. Ruiz calls gossip pure black magic.
Black magic, really?
Think about it. You're using the creative power of your word to negatively affect someone's reputation, someone's reality, even when they aren't present to defend themselves. You're spreading poison with your words.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. And what about towards ourselves?
That's often where the most damage is done. Careless, negative self-talk absolutely degrades our self-worth. Every time you tell yourself, I'm stupid, I'm unattractive, I'll never succeed, you're using that magical force against yourself.
You're casting a spell of inadequacy on yourself.
Precisely. And beyond the personal, careless speech just spreads negative energy. Think about environments filled with complaining, blaming, cynicism. It drags everyone down. It poisons the collective atmosphere.
So what does impeccable actually mean here? Does it mean being perfect, never saying anything wrong?
That's a common misunderstanding. But no, it doesn't mean perfect. We need to look at the Toltec roots. In their context, sin wasn't about moral transgression in the way we usually think of it. It literally meant acting against oneself, missing the mark, wasting energy.
Okay, so impeccable means without sin in that sense.
Exactly. Impeccable means without sin, or more practically, using your energy, your creative force, your word, efficiently and in alignment with truth and love. It means not acting against yourself.
So when you gossip or trash talk yourself,
You are fundamentally misusing your creative energy. You're acting against yourself, creating internal conflict, emotional poison, and wasting precious personal power. Being impeccable means conserving that energy and directing it consciously towards truth, towards love, towards creating the reality you actually want. It's the most efficient use of your power.
okay, that reframes it completely. It's not about rigid perfection, it's about integrity and energy efficiency.
Right. And the emotional shift, the turning point here, is when you truly grasp the profound magic inherent in speaking with integrity. It's a very practical shift. You move from a state of verbal chaos, where words just spill out reactively, often driven by fear or habit.
To a place of clarity and self-respect.
Yes, where every word carries purpose and weight. You start choosing your words consciously. And this demands radical self-awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's not just about what you say out loud to other people.
Not at all. It's crucially about that constant internal dialogue. The stream of thoughts, the self-talk that runs in the background all day long. Being impeccable applies there just as much, if not more.
Let's connect this to psychology for a second. How does language actually do this? Is it just about feeling better?
It goes deeper than just feelings. When you consistently tell yourself, I'm not good enough, or I always mess things up, you are literally programming your brain. Language acts like a kind of neural map maker. You're carving out and reinforcing neurological pathways associated with inadequacy or failure. By using negative language carelessly, especially about yourself, you're essentially paving mental highways that make it easier to think those thoughts and harder to believe anything different. It makes failure feel more inevitable.
So you're literally building the architecture of your own limitations with your words.
That's exactly it. It's the ultimate form of self-betrayal, using your most potent creative tool to build your own cage.
We see this carelessness everywhere in U.S. culture, don't we? Think about how normalized sarcasm has become, or just casual self-deprecation as a way to relate.
Absolutely. We say things like, ugh, I'm such an idiot, or my life is a complete dumpster fire, often just for a laugh or to seem relatable.
But Ruiz would say that language isn't harmless banter.
Not at all. He'd say it's a verbal contract you're signing with yourself, and maybe even reinforcing with the people around you. Each utterance subtly degrades your self-worth, chipping away at your power using the very tool meant for creation.
So what does the alternative look like? The healing language promoted by this agreement.
It means shifting from reactive, judgmental language to descriptive, intentional language. So instead of reacting to a mistake with, I failed that test, I'm so stupid.
Which is a really common reaction.
Very common. The impeccable word might sound more like, okay, I didn't achieve the result I wanted on that test. I can see where I went wrong, and I understand what adjustments I need to make next time. See the difference.
Yeah, one is a judgment on your identity. The other is an observation about an event and a plan for action.
Precisely. It means using intentional language, especially around sensitive cultural pressure points. Think about body image, the casual negativity many people use about their own bodies. Or career goals, the way people internalize labels of failure.
So instead of internalizing media ideals or comparing yourself negatively,
You choose words that honor your actual strength, your effort, your unique journey. Words that build you up, that align with truth and self-love. Using your word impeccably is really the foundation for all the other freedoms Ruiz talks about. Why? Because you stop using the creative force of language to constantly build and reinforce the walls of your own prison.
you start using it to build pathways to freedom instead.
That's the goal.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. All right, so the first agreement is about managing the energy we put out into the world through our words. The second agreement, don't take anything personally, seems to be about managing what we let in.
Exactly. This one offers essentially psychological armor. It's a deep dive into emotional liberation, and achieving it requires a really radical shift in how we perceive interactions with others.
What's the core insight here? It sounds simple, but I suspect it's incredibly difficult in practice.
The core Toltec insight is this: nothing other people do is because of you. Let that sink in. Nothing. Their actions, their words, their opinions, their emotions, they are never fundamentally about you.
Never. That seems hard to believe. What are they about then?
They are mirrors. Mirrors reflecting their own internal worlds, their own programming, their own fears, their own judgments, their own personal dream of the planet.
So if someone is cruel or insults me,
They are expressing the suffering, the fear, the anger, the poison that they are carrying inside themselves. They're essentially projecting their internal movie onto the screen of the world, and you just happen to be standing in front of the projector at that moment.
so I'm just a collateral damage in their internal war.
In a sense, yes. You become the hook they hang their own issues on. And the moment of true liberation, the huge emotional release, comes when you can truly internalize that truth.
That their opinions, their insults, even their compliments, they aren't really about me.
Exactly. Their judgments reflect their agreements, their beliefs, their current emotional state. If they call you brilliant, it says more about what they value or admire. If they call you terrible, it says more about their insecurities or frustrations. Neither statement defines your objective inherent worth or reality.
Wow. That takes the sting out of criticism, but also maybe some of the glow out of praise.
It can, initially. But what it gives you instead is stable, internal validation rather than relying on the roller coaster of external opinions.
Yeah.
You become the source of your own sense of worth.
So how does taking things personally create suffering?
Because the entire drama, the conflict, the hurt feelings, the resentment, it unfolds almost entirely in that moment when we choose to make it about us. When we choose to believe their projection is truth.
So conflicts that used to feel like huge personal attacks.
Can start to feel different.
Mm.
A boss harshly criticizing your work, a partner making a passive-aggressive comment, a friend ghosting you instead of an existential threat to your worth. It can become a more detached observation of their internal struggle, their communication style, their fears.
That sounds incredibly freeing. The relief must be immense.
The profound relief and the sense of empowerment that comes from genuinely detaching from external opinions, it really cannot be overstated. You effectively stop volunteering to ingest other people's emotional poison. You stop carrying their baggage. You reclaim your emotional sovereignty.
This connects really clearly to modern psychology, doesn't it? The whole concept of projection.
Absolutely seamlessly.
Yeah.
Psychology talks about projection all the time. It's when people unconsciously attribute their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or motives onto someone else. Their own fears of inadequacy, their self-loathing, their anger. It gets projected outward as criticism or blame.
And the Toltec insight adds that crucial step. The moment you personalize that projection.
You essentially sign a new damaging agreement. You agree, yes, this criticism is true, this poison is mine now. You accept their suffering as your reality, and in doing so, you instantly become a victim of their internal chaos, their dream.
Okay, but here's a practical question then. If we try not to take anything personally, don't we risk becoming completely detached? Like, how do we distinguish between someone just projecting their stuff onto us and genuine, useful, constructive feedback that we actually need to hear to grow?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's the real challenge in applying this agreement wisely in the real world.
Sure.
The distinction, I think, often lies in the source and the intent of the communication and our internal response.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Genuine constructive feedback is usually specific, focused on behavior or actions rather than character. and delivered with a clear intent to help or improve the situation. It often feels, even if difficult, like it contains useful data. Toxic criticism or projection, on the other hand, tends to be vague, aimed at your fundamental worth or character. You're just lazy, you always mess up, and often feels like it's delivered primarily to hurt, diminish, or simply release the speaker's own stress or negativity.
So it's about discerning the energy behind the words.
Partly, yes, and also about how we process it. We can learn to listen to the words, extract any potentially useful data. Okay, maybe my report did need more detail in Section B, without internalizing the emotional poison or the judgment attached to it. We can choose to respond to the factual content, if any, but firmly refuse to adopt the emotional charge.
Okay, let's apply this to some high-stakes U.S. situations. What about intense criticism in really competitive workplaces? Performance reviews that feel brutal?
Great example. That performance review that feels like a devastating personal attack might, if you look closely, actually be heavily fueled by the boss's own pressure from their superiors, corporate quotas, or maybe even a colleague's insecurity trying to undermine you.
So if you take it personally,
You internalize shame, fear, maybe even anger. You might spiral into self-doubt. But if you manage not to take it personally, you can step back, analyze the actual facts presented separate from the emotional delivery, and ask yourself calmly, okay, what, if anything, is the actionable feedback here? What specific action is required? Becomes problem solving instead of personal devastation.
what about the online world? Social media commentary, trolls.
Oh, the social media sphere is practically a giant real-time theater of projection. Trolls, aggressive commentators, people leaving needlessly harsh reviews. It's often pure externalized suffering and anger looking for a target.
So applying this agreement means realizing their rage isn't really about my profile picture or my opinion on a movie.
Exactly. When you can genuinely refuse to internalize that collective rage, that free-floating fear and judgment online, you develop invaluable psychological armor. You start to see that the intensity of the reaction is almost never proportional to the trigger. It's about the person typing, struggling within their own personal nightmare, their own dream of the planet.
So ultimately, not taking things personally isn't about becoming cold or indifferent.
Not at all. It's actually an act of profound self-love and self-respect. You recognize that you are inherently immune to other people's poison simply by choosing not to drink it. It allows you to observe the often tragic drama of humanity with compassion, but without feeling obligated to become a participant in everyone else's suffering. You preserve your own peace.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Okay, we've covered managing our output with the first agreement, our words, and managing our input with the second, not taking things personally. Now the third agreement, don't make assumptions. This seems to tackle the internal chaos we create ourselves.
Precisely. If the second agreement saves us from absorbing external toxicity, this third one saves us from the self-inflated wounds, the internal melodrama that comes from constant guesswork about others and situations.
Guesswork, yeah, we do that a lot, don't we? Why are assumptions so problematic according to Ruiz? They're insidious because, essentially, when we face an informational gap, we don't know what someone is thinking, why they did something, what will happen next. We tend to fill that gap not with neutral possibilities, but with content drawn directly from our own programming, our own fears, our own book of law.
So we project our own stuff into the blanks.
Exactly. We assume we know what others are thinking. They must be mad at me. What their motives are, they're definitely trying to undermine me, or what our role is supposed to be in their lives. If they really cared, they would have called.
And this creates, as you said, internal melodrama.
Totally. It's like we become directors of these silent movies playing out in our heads. We cast other people in roles, write dialogue for them, anticipate their actions based on our assumptions.
Yeah.
And then we get genuinely angry, disappointed, or heartbroken when those real people inevitably fail to follow the fictional script we wrote for them without ever telling them.
Huh. When you put it like that, it sounds absurd, but we do it all the time.
Constantly. And this silent movie-making process is a primary source of misunderstandings, unnecessary conflict, hurt feelings, and tremendous confusion in relationships and life in general.
And because our domesticated mind, the one run by the judge, is often fear-based.
We usually default to assuming the worst-case scenario, right? A non-response to a text must mean disapproval or rejection. A lack of praise must mean they think we did a bad job. A vague comment must have a hidden negative meaning. This internal storytelling is incredibly taxing emotionally.
So what's the turning point here? How do we stop making assumptions?
The transformative turning point is recognizing the immense amount of energy we waste on this guesswork. Think about the hours spent ruminating, creating scenarios, worrying about things that might be completely unfounded. We expend so much emotional capital building these elaborate fictions.
Why do we do it then, if it's so costly?
Often, Ruiz suggests it comes back to fear, specifically the fear of vulnerability, the fear of rejection, which was so deeply ingrained during our childhood domestication.
How does fear stop us from just asking?
Because asking for clarification feels risky. Asking, are you upset with me? Or what exactly do you expect from me here? Or can we define our relationship? Requires vulnerability. You might get an answer you don't like.
So it feels safer, maybe just momentarily, to make an assumption and live with the quiet disappointment or anxiety?
Than to risk the potential pain of asking directly and confirming a difficult truth. We choose the familiar suffering of assumption over the potential sharp pain of clarity.
Okay, so the practical application is, well, it sounds obvious, but maybe revolutionary in practice.
It is. It's the profound importance of asking questions and communicating directly, courageously seeking clarity. Just ask. The moment you ask a clear question, you collapse the realm of infinite negative assumptions and replace it with factual data. Even if the data is, I don't know yet, or I'm not ready to talk about it, you step out of your internal movie and into reality.
And this transforms relationships how?
Immediately and fundamentally. Relationships cease to be these silent, stressful tests where we're constantly trying to read minds and hoping others read ours. Instead, they become spaces for open, honest dialogue built on seeking and providing clarity. Trust grows because you know you don't have to guess.
Let's bring this into the U.S. context again. Where do assumptions cause the most trouble in everyday American life? Dating seems like a minefield for this.
Oh, absolutely. The modern dating world, especially with online dating and texting, is absolutely rife with ambiguity, vague communication, unspoken expectations, and phenomena like ghosting. People make huge assumptions about exclusivity, about commitment levels, about intentions, often without ever having a clear, direct, defining the relationship or DTR conversation.
And then when things blow up because they were on totally different pages?
The resulting pain and confusion is immense. And often it's not rooted in actual malice from either side, but purely in unvoiced, unconfirmed assumptions that were allowed to fester.
What about professionally?
Rampant there, too. You might assume, for instance, that a promotion is basically guaranteed because you've been working killer hours and hitting your targets. This assumption is often based on the cultural agreement that hard work always equals reward.
But reality is often more complex.
Much more complex. There might be budget issues, restructuring other candidates, skills gaps you're unaware of. If you never directly ask about the requirements, the timeline, the process, the competition, if you just assume it's coming, the disappointment when it doesn't materialize feels like a personal betrayal. A single, clear, perhaps difficult conversation up front could have prevented that specific flavor of pain by managing expectations.
So it's about prioritizing clear contracts, whether they're emotional in a relationship or more formal in a work setting.
Yes. Instead of just relying on vague, inherited social norms or hoping people are psychic, we need the courage to seek explicit understanding. Don't assume, ask.
And the freedom that comes from this agreement.
It's the instant reduction of internal static, of emotional noise. When you actively refuse to make assumptions, you pull yourself out of your fear-based fictional narratives and ground yourself firmly in the factual present, however incomplete it might be. You take responsibility for seeking clarity, which empowers you to act decisively based on the reality you can confirm, not just the anxieties you project.
Less drama, more clarity.
Much less drama, much more peace.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
All right, we've got 3 powerful agreements designed to change how we use words, how we process others' actions, and how we seek clarity. But let's be real, living up to these perfectly all the time sounds impossible.
Yeah.
We're human. We mess up.
Exactly. And that's where the genius and the compassion of the 4th agreement come in. Always do your best. This isn't about achieving perfection. It's the crucial mechanism for navigating our inherent human imperfection without falling into crippling guilt or burnout.
Okay, so what does always do your best actually mean in this context? Does it mean push yourself to the absolute limit every single day? No, absolutely not. That's a common misinterpretation, especially in our hustle-obsessed culture. Ruiz guides us to understand that our best is incredibly dynamic. It's not a fixed standard. It fluctuates constantly, moment to moment, day to day.
Fluctuates based on what?
Based entirely on internal and external circumstances. Your energy levels, your physical health, your emotional state, the environment around you, all of it. Your absolute best effort when you're sick with the flu or grieving a loss or exhausted from lack of sleep or dealing with chronic stress is going to look drastically different from your best effort when you're feeling rested, healthy, energized, and inspired.
Ah, okay. That distinction is critical, isn't it? Your best is context dependent.
Completely context dependent. The core requirement of this agreement isn't that you hit some external benchmark of peak performance every day. The requirement is that your commitment to putting forth the effort appropriate for that specific moment stays steady.
So the effort level might change, but the intention to give what you can give remains.
Precisely. It's about showing up and giving your all within the circumstances of the moment. It's the art of adapting, of giving fully, but without that damaging attachment to achieving a specific, often idealized outcome every single time.
How do you judge it then?
You judge yourself honestly, based only on the effort you were capable of giving under the conditions that actually existed at that time, not against some imaginary standard of your perfect day best.
You called this the safety net for the other agreements. How does that work?
It's the crucial safety net because, as you said, we will inevitably break the first three agreements sometimes. We'll say something we regret, not impeccable. We'll take something personally, we'll make an assumption. We're human.
Yeah, guaranteed.
So if you know you honestly did your best in that moment, even if your best included slipping up on another agreement because you were tired or stressed, then the fourth agreement prevents the internal judge from tearing you apart afterward with guilt and self-recrimination.
So it short-circuits the shame spiral?
Exactly. If you look back and can honestly say, given how I felt and what was happening, it was the best I could manage right then there's nothing for the judge to punish you for. You learn, you adjust, but you don't drown in regret. It frees you from that endless cycle of self-punishment.
That's incredibly compassionate. It allows for being human.
Deeply compassionate. And the engagement peak, the real feeling of liberation here, comes from that self-compassion. It frees you from the heavy burden of past shortcomings. It's rooted in that Toltec view of life as fluid, energetic, cyclical. You're not expected to be a static machine operating at 100% efficiency 247.
Which is a message that feels almost revolutionary today.
Especially when you contrast it with the dominant culture in the U.S. Think about the pervasive obsession with hustle culture, the grind, the glorification of burnout.
No days off, sleep when you're dead, that kind of thing.
Yes, that whole ethos constantly demands impossible, unsustainable levels of peak performance. It implicitly judges rest, recovery, or simply having an off day as weakness or failure. And this cultural agreement fuels profound guilt the moment you need to step back or take care of yourself. It's inherently unsustainable and ultimately leads to self-betrayal.
So the fourth agreement is a direct challenge to that.
A vital and much healthier challenge. It argues that sustainable effort doing your fluctuating best based on reality is actually far more productive, more creative, and certainly healthier in the long run than striving for an impossible standard of constant peak performance that just guarantees eventual exhaustion and collapse.
It's like quality over sheer quantity of effort.
In a way, if your genuine best effort today because you're feeling unwell or overwhelmed is only managing 4 hours of focused work, well, doing those 4 hours fully, with commitment and without beating yourself up, is infinitely superior to forcing 8 miserable hours while fighting your body and mind, filled with resistance and self-criticism.
So doing your best isn't measured by the outcome, but by the quality of the engagement in the present moment.
Exactly. It's an action plan rooted in self-respect and showing up authentically, not an external measurement of achievement. It also helps eliminate that paralysis that comes from perfectionism. The fear of not being perfect often stops us from even starting. If the goal is just to do your best right now, whatever that looks like, it frees you to simply begin. You're fully engaged in the process, regardless of the final result.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
Okay, so we've explored the 4 agreements, these powerful tools for changing our relationship with our words, with others' opinions, with assumptions, and with our own efforts. Now, the focus seems to shift, doesn't it, towards actively using these tools to dismantle the old structure.
Yes, the narrative definitely escalates here. It becomes a call to action, even a call to rebellion. It's about challenging and actively shattering those outdated, limiting beliefs and agreements that we internalized during our domestication.
The ones that built the prison walls in the first place. Exactly. Ruiz frames the listener, you, as a kind of spiritual warrior, reclaiming your personal power, reclaiming your destiny from the tyranny of the old agreements and the internal judge. It's about choosing freedom, consciously, over the familiar comfort of known suffering.
So how do we actually do that? How do we break these old pacts that feel so deeply ingrained?
The process of dissolving these old agreements, especially the core ones signed out of fear or a need for love during childhood, relies on two major, deeply interconnected tools: forgiveness and absolute awareness.
Forgiveness first. Forgiveness of who?
Crucially, forgiveness of yourself. You have to forgive yourself for having signed those contracts in the first place. You did it to survive, to navigate your world, to feel safe, to receive love under the conditions you were given. It wasn't a conscious choice made from a place of power.
That feels important. Releasing the self-blame.
Absolutely essential. And then you also work towards forgiving those who impose the agreements on you, parents, society, whoever. Not necessarily condoning harmful actions, but recognizing that they were almost certainly just passing on the programs, the suffering they themselves inherited. They were operating within their dream.
Why is forgiveness so critical?
Because without forgiveness, the judge retains its power. Resentment, blame, guilt. These are the fuels that keep the judge active and the old agreements energized. Forgiveness cuts off the fuel supply.
Okay, so forgiveness clears the ground. What about awareness?
Awareness is the ongoing practice. It's about becoming acutely conscious of when these old agreements are triggered in your daily life. Noticing the thoughts, the feelings, the automatic reactions that stem from beliefs like, I'm not worthy, I must be perfect, I need everyone's approval.
Have to catch them in the act.
You have to catch them in the act. And the four agreements give you the tools to respond differently when you catch them. When the old agreement, I need approval, gets triggered, the second agreement, don't take personally, reminds you their opinion isn't about you. When I must know everything leads to anxiety, the third agreement, don't assume, prompts you to ask questions instead of guessing.
So awareness identifies the old pattern, and the agreements provide the new response.
Exactly. And as you consistently practice this, identify the old agreement, refuse defeated energy, and consciously choose a new response, based on the four agreements, the old pact begins to lose its power. It starts to dissolve, like starving it of attention.
And this process can bring up a lot of emotion, right? The sources talk about healing old wounds.
Definitely. As you engage in this conscious dismantling, you'll likely encounter the original emotional wounds associated with signing those agreements. Times you felt rejected, shamed, or afraid, which led you to agree to limit yourself.
That sounds painful.
It can be, but it's a healing pain. By meeting those old wounds with awareness and the self-compassion fostered by the fourth agreement, always do your best, you stop pouring energy into maintaining the wound. You allow it to finally heal. When you consciously identify a limiting belief, like say, I must always be strong and never show vulnerability, and you actively choose a new agreement like, I embrace my full humanity, including vulnerability, the old structure starts to crumble.
Does the judge just give up easily?
Haha, not usually. The sources note that when you really start practicing the agreements and stop listening to the judge, it doesn't just fade away quietly. Often it screams louder for a while. It tries desperately to reassert its authority, throwing more fear and doubt your way.
Then a final desperate stand.
Sort of. But if you persist with the four agreements, the judge gradually loses its power because its laws, the old fear-based agreements, are no longer the active contracts governing your life. You're essentially withdrawing your belief from its authority. And that is what paves the way for a genuine emotional rebirth, for the emergence of your authentic self, unburdened by all that inherited guilt, fear, and expectation.
Let's nail down some specific U.S.-based limiting beliefs this process might target. We talked about the pression for success.
Right. So a really common one, rooted in American capitalism, might be the deep-seated agreement. My inherent worth as a human being is directly tied to my financial status and my productivity. Or, I'm defined solely by my job title and how busy I appear.
Those feel incredibly pervasive.
There are foundational agreements signed with the dominant dream of the planet in this culture, and they fuel so much of the chronic anxiety, dissatisfaction, and never enough feeling we see everywhere.
So breaking that agreement involves consciously choosing a new one.
Yes. And the practical difficulty here shouldn't be underestimated. Choosing and truly living a new, authentic agreement, like, my worth is inherent and unchanging, completely independent of my income, my title, or my output, can feel terrifying at first.
Why terrifying?
Because the collective dream, the voices all around you, and maybe your own judge, will likely scream that this new belief is lazy, irresponsible, delusional, or naive. How will you survive? You'll achieve nothing. The pressure to conform back to the old agreement is immense.
So it takes real emotional bravery.
It takes courage. It requires choosing your own inner peace and authentic joy over the fear-based approval of the crowd. It means trusting your own inner guidance more than the dictates of the collective dream.
But the reward.
The reward is immense. It's the profound realization that the pervasive fear you might have been living under for years, it wasn't even truly yours. It was just background noise, static from the shared dream that you absorbed. It's the moment you consciously unsign the contract of cultural conformity and declare your own spiritual independence, choosing to live guided by your own integrity, truth, and joy.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next.
So after all this work, recognizing the illusion, understanding domestication, practicing the four agreement, actively breaking the old pacts, where does it all lead? What's the culmination of this entire journey?
This brings us to what Ruiz calls the visionary finale of the book, particularly in Chapter 7, titled The New Dream, Heaven on Earth.
Exactly. It's a powerful culmination. After systematically dismantling the old, fear-based agreements that created our personal hell, we're not just left in a void. We are now free, empowered, to consciously build our own new reality, our own personal dream.
A dream based on what, instead of fear?
A dream based on self-love, on truth, on joy, on the principles embodied in the four agreements themselves.
And this idea of heaven on earth, he means it literally, like, achievable now.
That's the profound resolution he offers. Heaven isn't some distant reward you get after you die if you follow the rules. It's not a place. It's a state of being, a daily reality that you actively create right now through the sustained, moment-by-moment application of these agreements.
How does that work? How do the agreements create heaven?
Well, think about it. If you consistently manage to be impeccable with your word, creating truth and love, if you don't take anything personally, immune to others' poison, if you don't make assumptions, living in clarity, and if you always do your best, acting with self-compassion and without self-judgment, what is your internal reality like?
It sounds peaceful, joyful, free from conflict.
Exactly. Your internal reality transforms into a state of peace, love, and joy, which is Ruiz's definition of heaven. You are no longer living trapped inside the collective nightmare, the dream of the planet. You are living awake in your own personal new dream.
So the power lies in mastering our own perception and response.
That's the key action for you, the listener. Realizing that you possess the inherent power to create your own personal paradise, not by changing the external world, but by mastering your internal world, your beliefs, your perceptions, your reactions.
This resonates with a lot of other spiritual teachings, doesn't it? The idea that internal change manifests external reality.
Absolutely. It echoes many global spiritual traditions that emphasize manifesting reality from the inside out. The external world might still contain chaos, suffering, and people living in their own dreams, but your perception of it, your reaction to it, and therefore your entire experience of reality changes fundamentally. Your experience becomes one of peace, even amidst external turmoil.
Okay, so that's the grand vision. But the book doesn't just end there, does it? There's a chapter on prayers and ongoing practice.
Right, chapter 9. Ruiz leaves us with these more meditative closing words. It feels like a quiet epilogue, something that lingers, and it serves a crucial purpose, reminding us that this isn't a one-time fix.
Mastery isn't a destination you arrive at and then you're done.
Exactly. It's not a graduation ceremony. It's a maintenance plan. It's an ongoing practice for life.
And what are the key elements of that ongoing practice?
He emphasizes two final continuous actions: gratitude and an unwavering commitment to ongoing practice. Gratitude for the awareness gained, for the freedom experienced, and commitment because these agreements aren't like checkboxes you tick off once and forget.
They require daily vigilance.
Daily, moment-to-moment awareness and engagement to maintain the clarity, the peace, the impeccability you've worked to achieve. The old habits, the pull of the collective dream, they're always there. Practice is what keeps your new dream alive and vibrant.
So the emotional closure isn't about "I'm cured," but more about embracing the path itself.
Yes, embracing the full path of mastery. The mastery of awareness, the mastery of intent, the mastery of transformation, and underpinning it all, the mastery of love. Because ultimately, love for self and for others is the only force truly powerful enough to permanently replace the old agreements that were built entirely on fear.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. #tagoutro.
Okay, so if we try to synthesize this whole deep dive, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We started in the confusion, the fog of the smoky mirror.
Yeah, realizing we weren't seeing clearly.
Then we looked unflinchingly at the process of childhood domestication, how those limiting agreements got installed.
And then we armed ourselves, really, with the practical power of the four agreements themselves.
Right. being impeccable with your word, reclaiming our creative power.
Don't take anything personally, building that emotional armor.
Don't make assumptions, choosing clarity over internal drama.
And always do your best, practicing self-compassion and sustainable effort.
And we saw how this whole path, followed courageously, leads directly towards breaking free, towards the liberation of creating your own new dream.
I think what's really empowering, what really lands for me, is internalizing just how much power you, the listener, actually hold. The power to consciously unsign those invisible contracts you inherited. That feeling of being trapped, that prison you sometimes feel inside. It wasn't built by external forces alone. It was largely built and maintained by your own acceptance of the fear, the judgments, the limitations passed down through generations, through the dream of the planet.
And freedom, therefore, isn't some lottery ticket you might win. It's not a single event. It's a continuous act of construction, something you build day by day, moment by moment.
By vigilantly, consciously applying these 4 simple, yet, let's be honest, infinitely challenging packs in your daily life.
It absolutely requires spiritual vigilance, doesn't it? Paying attention.
And real courage. It takes profound courage sometimes to challenge that ingrained voice of the internal judge, the pull of the collective dream.
And perhaps most importantly, sustaining it requires a deep, unconditional love and compassion for yourself, especially on the days when you slip up, which you will. That's what allows you to get back up and keep practicing, keep building your freedom.
Okay, so to leave you with something to chew on, here's a final provocative thought. What if there's a kind of 5th unspoken agreement? One that's necessary to keep the other 4 alive and effective?
Oh, what would that be?
Maybe it's simply the commitment to never stop questioning, to never stop critically examining the rules of the collective dream, the assumptions you hold, the beliefs you live by, to constantly ask, is this really true? Is this really mine? Does this serve my freedom and joy?
I like that. An agreement to maintain conscious inquiry.
So the question for you then is, what personal agreement, based purely on your authentic joy, your truth, and not on the fear you've inherited or absorbed from others, what new agreement will you consciously draft and commit to for yourself starting today?
A powerful question to carry forward. Until next time.
We really hope this deep dive into the Toltec path laid out in the 4 agreements has given you some practical tools, some insights, maybe even some inspiration to begin transforming your own reality. Thank you so much for joining us.